The galaxy thought they had crushed Earth, until humanity struck back and the Council faced a nightmare they could never imagine. The Galaxy Council had always ruled with power and arrogance, and they believed no world could ever resist them for long. And Earth had been one of their easiest targets at first, and they had stripped Earth of its colonies and its freedom, and they had sent warships to orbit above the blue planet to remind its people who was in charge, and many humans were taken away from their homes and forced into slavery on distant colonies, while the Council sat in their shining halls laughing at the weakness of Earth. And yet beneath the surface of Earth something was building that the Council did not see because they had forgotten the most important truth about humans, and that truth was that humans never forgot when they were wronged, and they never forgave when they were humiliated. Beneath the ruins of New York City, far from the eyes of alien drones, a group of survivors met in silence, and the room was dark, lit only by the glow of broken screens and old lamps. But inside it, the fire of revenge burned hotter than ever before, and Daniel Harris stood before them, a man who had once been a soldier and had lost too many friends to the cruelty of the aliens, and his eyes were sharp, filled with the weight of battles past, and beside him stood Laura Mitchell, a scientist who had once worked with peaceful dreams of discovery. But now her knowledge was bent toward survival, and she had studied alien machines and alien codes for years, and she knew things that could become weapons in the right hands, and together they spoke with voices that carried across the room and into the hearts of everyone listening. And Daniel said, "The Council thinks we are broken, but they are wrong." And Laura said, "The Council thinks they understand us, but they do not." And from that night forward, the plan for revenge was no longer just a whisper. It became a promise. Life on Earth had grown hard under alien rule, and cities were broken and families scattered, and yet people survived in hidden shelters and abandoned tunnels, and they rebuilt scraps of machines into tools of resistance, and in secret places, old factories were turned into workshops and forgotten bunkers were cleaned and powered again. And Daniel visited them one by one, talking to the workers and reminding them of what was at stake. And Laura worked through sleepless nights taking alien fragments and finding ways to connect them to human machines, and slowly, piece by piece, the skeleton of resistance grew stronger. And it was not only on Earth, because across the galaxy, where human slaves labored under alien whips, the same anger was rising. On Vega 9, a cold mining world where humans were forced to dig rare crystals, a young mechanic named Alex Carter kept his head low during the day, but at night he smuggled broken alien parts into a hidden shed behind the mines, and there, with trembling hands, he built strange machines mixing alien metal with human steel. And a doctor named Linda Perez moved through the camp, healing broken bones and whispering courage into the ears of the tired, and she told them the same thing over and over. Earth has not forgotten you, and Earth will rise again. And though the guards laughed and beat them harder, the spark was already burning inside every worker. The Galaxy Council, meanwhile, continued its life of luxury, and its leaders gathered in shining chambers on distant worlds, and they spoke of Earth as if it were nothing more than a stone beneath their feet. And they mocked the humans, calling them fragile creatures from a death world who had no place in the stars. And they sent reports that Earth was stable and the colonies secure, and no one in the Council feared humanity because they had crushed many worlds before, and they had never faced serious resistance, and yet there were whispers among some of their younger officers who had seen how humans survived conditions that killed others. And these officers asked, "What if we are wrong about them?" And the older leaders silenced them quickly, because arrogance had blinded them to the truth. Back on Earth, Daniel gathered his closest allies in an underground base carved beneath the Rocky Mountains, and the air smelled of oil and old engines, and here rows of forgotten warships lay under dust and rust, and Laura walked among them, running her hands along the metal, and she whispered, "They think these are relics, but they will become nightmares." And Daniel nodded, because he knew humans did not need the most advanced ships. They only needed ships that worked and minds that could twist them into weapons. And every engineer, every pilot, and every soldier who came to that base felt the same spark in their chest, because they were not only fighting for survival, they were fighting for revenge, and revenge gave them strength. As weeks turned to months, the resistance grew in silence. And on Vega 9, Alex Carter sent coded signals hidden inside mining reports, and these signals reached Earth through secret channels, and Laura decoded them and smiled because it meant that the colonies were ready, and Linda Perez risked her life smuggling medicine and messages between camps, and she became a legend whispered about as the doctor, who never bowed. And in the shadows of the galaxy, more and more humans waited for the signal to rise, and Daniel knew that when the time came, it had to be swift and brutal, because hesitation would mean death for millions. The first trial of strength came not in battle but in secrecy, because one of the council's governors planned to strip more resources from Earth, and Daniel and Laura saw their chance, and with careful planning, they turned a shipment convoy into a test of human will, and small ships crafted from old freighters and disguised as traders approached the convoy, and at the right moment they struck fast and hard, boarding the alien ships and taking control before alarms could be raised. And for the first time in years, humans captured advanced alien supplies and weapons, and when the ships returned to Earth, the underground bases roared with energy, because this was proof that they could fight back. And Daniel told them this is only the beginning. But revenge was not without cost, because the council was not blind forever, and when reports of missing convoys reached their ears, suspicion grew, and they sent more patrols through human systems, and they increased the cruelty on the colonies. And Alex Carter saw friends beaten to death for small mistakes, and Linda Perez worked through endless nights to save lives with almost no supplies. And yet even as pain grew, so did the fire of resistance, because every lash and every death was remembered, and humans had long memories when it came to pain, and they promised themselves that when the day came, the council would feel it. Tenfold, Daniel and Laura argued often in the underground base, because Daniel wanted to strike quickly with whatever they had, while Laura urged patience because she knew one reckless move could end everything. And though their voices clashed, they both wanted the same thing, and the people around them trusted them because Daniel had the courage to lead men into battle, and Laura had the brilliance to turn impossible odds into strategy, and together they became the heart of Earth's revenge. And every man, woman, and child in the base looked at them as the hope that would carry humanity out of darkness, far away in the council chambers. The leaders began to sense unease because trade reports showed irregularities, and patrol ships had vanished without a trace, and some demanded immediate punishment of Earth, but others dismissed it and said humans were too weak to matter, and in this arrogance lay their greatest mistake, because they still saw humans as broken slaves, and not as the rising storm, and the few voices of caution were ignored. And so the council returned to its feasts and debates, never realizing that, beneath the stars, the nightmare they feared was already waking, and so Earth prepared, and every night in the underground bases, the sound of hammers echoed against steel, and old ships came alive with new power, and every morning on Vega 9, the slaves whispered to one another that the day of freedom was near, and every hour Linda Perez and Alex Carter risked their lives to keep the spark alive. And every moment Daniel Harris and Laura Mitchell sharpened the blade of revenge, and though the galaxy did not yet see it, the tide was already turning, and the first moves of Earth's revenge had begun, and the nightmare for the Galaxy Council was closer than they ever imagined. On Vega 9, the nights were long and the air was thin, and every human slave who lived there worked under the watchful eyes of alien guards who carried energy whips and rifles. But despite the pain and cruelty, hope was slowly spreading among the workers, because whispers of Earth's secret plans had reached their ears, and Alex Carter was at the center of it, because he had turned his skill as a mechanic into something more dangerous, and in his small shed, hidden behind broken mining drills, he collected spare parts dropped by careless guards, and he built devices that looked like tools, but were in truth weapons waiting for the right day to be used. And though every moment of his work risked discovery, he did not stop, because he had already decided that if he was going to die, he would die fighting. Linda Perez walked the narrow tunnels of the mines with a small bag of supplies, and her hands were always stained with dust and blood from treating the wounds of her people, and though she was only one doctor with almost no real medicine, the people trusted her because she never turned anyone away, and she never bowed to the aliens, and in the darkest corners of the colony, she whispered words of defiance, saying, "Hold on, the day is coming." And though the guards tried to crush that hope, it grew stronger because humans knew suffering better than any other race, and they had learned to endure until the right moment. Back on Earth, Daniel Harris stood in the underground, base watching as old warships came alive again, and the air was filled with the sound of welding sparks and the roar of engines that had not run in decades. And every mechanic, every pilot, and every engineer worked as if their lives depended on it because they knew they did. And Laura Mitchell moved among them, studying the systems and making adjustments to integrate alien technology into the old ships, and her hands were quick, her eyes sharper than ever, and she pushed herself to exhaustion, because she knew time was running out. And Daniel watched her and said, "One day they will call you the mind that saved Earth." And she shook her head and said, "No. They will only remember if we succeed." The council still believed humans were broken, but small signs of resistance began to reach them, and patrols returned late, or did not return at all. And a few captured aliens told stories of ambushes in remote systems. And though the council laughed in public behind closed doors, some leaders began to worry, and they increased surveillance on human colonies and sent more troops to Earth. But their arrogance blinded them to the scale of what was happening, because they still saw humanity as scattered and weak, when in truth humanity was becoming united in a way it had never been before. One night in the underground base, Daniel called his people together, and the room was packed with tired faces smeared with oil and sweat. But their eyes burned with determination, and Daniel stood tall and said, "The time is near. We cannot wait much longer. If we wait, they will crush us piece by piece, but if we strike now, we can show them we are not broken." And Laura stepped forward and spoke calmly but with force. She said, "If we strike too early, we risk everything we need to be ready, not just with weapons but with coordination across the colonies, because Earth alone cannot win this war," and her words carried weight. But Daniel's fire could not be dimmed, and the two of them argued deep into the night while the people listened, and though their approaches were different, the people knew both voices were needed, because courage without wisdom was suicide, and wisdom without courage was surrender. On Vega 9, Alex Carter tested one of his machines in secret, and it was a crude bomb built from stolen power cells and scavenged wires. And when it exploded inside an abandoned shaft, the sound echoed through the tunnels, and for the first time he knew his creations could actually harm. The aliens and Linda Perez warned him to be careful, because if the guards discovered him, it would mean not only his death, but the death of everyone who helped him. And Alex nodded, but inside he felt a fire that no warning could put out, because he had tasted the possibility of victory. Word of small victories spread quickly among the colonies, and humans who once worked in silence began to look at each other with new courage, and alien overseers noticed the change, but they did not understand it. And when one guard asked why the humans were suddenly smiling, he received no answer, only the cold stare of a miner who no longer feared him, and that stare frightened him more than any weapon, because it meant the slaves no longer saw themselves as slaves, and when he reported it, his superior dismissed him. But that was the first sign of the storm to come. Back on Earth, Laura unlocked a piece of alien technology that allowed human ships to mask their energy signatures. And though the devices were unstable and dangerous, she knew they could give humans a chance to strike first and vanish. And when she showed it to Daniel, his face lit with the kind of hope that only war could bring. And he said, "With this, we can bleed them without warning." And she answered, "Only if we are careful." And so the plan began to take shape, not just for defense but for a campaign of shadow warfare that would remind the galaxy why humans were called Deathworlders. The Council, however, still prepared for a display of power, and they decided to send a massive fleet into human space to remind Earth of its place, and they called it a routine patrol. But everyone knew it was intimidation, and Daniel and Laura learned of it through intercepted signals, and they knew they could not fight the whole fleet head-on, but they could show the galaxy that Earth was no longer weak. And so preparations were made for the first true strike of the resistance, and every man and woman in the underground base felt the weight of what was coming, because success would bring hope, but failure would bring extinction. On Vega 9, Alex Carter received coded instructions through a smuggled device, and when he read the message, his hands trembled, because it confirmed what he had dreamed of for years. The resistance was real, and Earth was fighting back, and the time was coming when the colonies would rise. And he showed the message to Linda Perez, and tears filled her eyes, because after years of despair, there was finally proof that they were not alone. And she said, "Then we must be ready when the signal comes." And Alex nodded, knowing that everything he had built would finally have its purpose. The aliens on Vega 9 noticed more and more disobedience among the humans, and they responded with harsher punishments. But the harder they struck, the stronger the humans became, and every punishment only fueled more hatred and more resolve. And at night, when the guards slept, the humans whispered stories of Earth fighting. Back and those whispers spread like wildfire across the galaxy through hidden channels and smuggled codes. And soon the Council realized something they had never imagined. Humanity was no longer just surviving. Humanity was preparing to strike, and so the stage was set. Earth rebuilding its forgotten warships under the eyes of Daniel Harris and Laura Mitchell Vega. 9 sharpening its knives under the watch of Alex Carter and Linda Perez, and across the stars countless other humans waiting. In silence for the day they would rise, and though the Council still believed itself untouchable, the first cracks had appeared in their wall of power, and those cracks were spreading faster than they could see, and when the storm finally came, it would not only shake them, it would break them, and Earth's revenge would truly begin. The first strike came in silence in a forgotten system at the edge of Council space, where a patrol fleet of alien ships drifted lazily through the void, believing nothing could challenge them, because they had crushed every resistance before. But hidden among the asteroids, human ships waited. And they were not sleek or beautiful like the ships of the Council. They were patched together from old hulls and stolen parts and powered by engines that groaned with strain. Yet inside them burned a fire that no alien could understand, and at the command center Daniel Harris stood tall, staring at the enemy through flickering screens, and his voice was calm as he gave the order that would echo across the galaxy. He said, "It is time. Show them what Earth can do." The human ships moved like hunters through shadows, using the asteroids as cover, and Laura Mitchell sat at her console, calculating every move and adjusting the unstable cloaking devices she had created, and sparks flew as the machines pushed beyond their limits, but they held long enough for the fleet to slip behind the patrol unnoticed. And then at Daniel's signal, the first human missiles fired, and they streaked out like burning knives, cutting into the alien ships. Before alarms even rang, and explosions lit the void with fire brighter than any star. Alex Carter was in one of the fighters, his hands gripping the controls of a craft he had built himself from scraps and stolen technology. And though the ship shuddered, with every maneuver he flew with a reckless courage that no alien could predict. He darted between asteroid fields using gravity and debris as weapons, and his shots tore into the engines of ships far larger than his own. And for the first time in his life he felt not like a slave or a mechanic, but like a warrior of Earth, and every kill was a message to the galaxy. We are not broken, we are not finished. The battle was brutal and short, and when it ended the alien patrol fleet was gone, scattered as burning wrecks across the system, and only a handful of human ships were lost. And though the humans mourned their dead, they also felt something they had not felt in years. Victory. And in the silence that followed, Daniel looked around at his crew and said, "Remember this moment, because the galaxy will remember it too." And Laura whispered, "This is the spark, the fire has begun." And Alex Carter sat in his fighter, breathing hard with sweat dripping down his face, and he laughed because for the first time he believed the impossible was real. When news of the ambush reached the Galaxy Council, the leaders dismissed it as an accident or a stroke of luck, and they told themselves that humans could not truly challenge them. But behind their laughter there was unease, because the reports told of strange tactics of ships that should not have been able to move the way they did, of fighters that seemed to dance among asteroids with no fear, and some commanders whispered the old name for humans, Deathworlders. And though the Council silenced them, the word lingered like a shadow in their halls. Back on Vega 9, the whispers of victory reached the ears of the slaves, and when Linda Perez heard them, she stood taller and told the people, "See, I told you, Earth has not forgotten us." And Alex Carter's name spread quietly through the tunnels as the mechanic who had fought in the first battle, and the guards sensed the change because the humans no longer lowered their eyes when beaten, and some even dared to smile. And the guards did not understand why. But fear began to creep into their hearts because something unseen was moving against them. In the underground base on Earth, Daniel and Laura prepared for the Council's response, because they knew the Council would not ignore this forever. And Daniel spent long nights planning defenses while Laura worked to stabilize the fragile cloaking devices, and every time she fixed one another threatened to fail, but she kept going, because she knew the survival of Earth depended on it. And Daniel watched her and thought of how much they had both changed once they were simply a soldier and a scientist. but now they were the leaders of a war that would decide the fate of their species. The victory also gave them new allies because across the galaxy, other enslaved humans heard the news and sent signals of support, and some alien species who had suffered under the Council's cruelty began to consider that maybe humans could succeed where they had failed, and secret envoys began to reach out offering information supplies and even safe havens. And Daniel accepted them cautiously because he knew trust was dangerous, but he also knew that the war could not be won by Earth alone. And Laura agreed, though she reminded him that every ally came with risk and every risk could become a betrayal. The Council finally realized they could not ignore the humans any longer, and they prepared a massive fleet to crush Earth once and for all, and they believed that with overwhelming force they could end the rebellion in a single blow. And they sent messages to their colonies promising swift punishment and total destruction of human resistance. But instead of fear, those messages only spread defiance because everywhere humans heard them. They clenched their fists and whispered, "Let them come. We are ready and on Vega 9. Linda Perez looked at the people and said, "The day is coming soon." And Alex Carter tightened the straps of his fighter suit because he knew he would be in the skies again. And so the galaxy waited as the storm gathered, the Council preparing to unleash its might and humanity, preparing to show the galaxy what true defiance looked like, and, though the outcome was uncertain, one truth was clear. The nightmare the Council feared had already begun, and nothing could stop it now. The Council chamber was filled with voices that tried to explain away the fear, but no explanation could make sense anymore. The leaders argued about trade routes, alliances, and the old treaties. Yet in their hearts, they knew the old rules no longer mattered because Earth had broken the balance forever. The human fleet had not just won a battle, it had exposed how weak the galaxy had become. The empires had relied on fear and reputation to hold power for centuries. But humans did not fear them, and that single truth spread across the galaxy faster than any weapon in the far edge of space. Captain John sat in his command chair on the ship horizon and listened to the reports flowing, and every intercepted message from alien channels confirmed the same thing: panic was spreading. Entire colonies of alien citizens were calling for surrender before any human ships even arrived. John knew this was not only about war, it was about respect and fear. In equal measure, humans had shown they would not back down when threatened, and that made them impossible to control. On the ground in New York City, Laura moved between war councils where scientists, soldiers, and diplomats all worked together. She was no longer just a scientist. She had become one of the voices the president trusted most. She explained again and again that the Council would not stop until humanity was either crushed or completely controlled. Yet each time she added that humans had already proven they could stand alone. The room listened in silence because her calm words carried the weight of recent victories. Meanwhile, on the desert world of Kalmir, where the Council had hidden one of its greatest weapons, a machine built to destroy fleets, an old guardian watched the horizon. When the humans finally arrived, they did not come with fire. First, instead, they came with a message. They broadcasted one sentence across every channel: "We will answer every strike twice." Over the Guardian knew in that moment the machine was useless because no machine could stop a people willing to fight without limits. Back at the Council chamber, Elder Vrakon slammed his claws against the table, demanding that humans be destroyed before their courage infected other species. But, even as he shouted, reports came in of minor species refusing to pay tribute. Entire systems were announcing independence. Small empires declared neutrality. The nightmare the Council feared was already happening, not only because humans fought back, but because others now believed they could too. Captain John received a direct message from the president: "Hold the line until Earth is safe, but do not chase every victory." His answer was simple, understood. Yet inside, he knew this war was no longer about safety. It was about rewriting the order of the stars. Humans had been underestimated, treated as prey, and insulted on every stage. Now that insult would be repaid, not through cruelty, but through strength and unshakable will. The alien fleets that still dared to gather moved carefully, keeping distance from human patrols. No commander wanted to be the next to lose thousands of ships in a single hour. John used this fear as a weapon, letting them see the strength of human resolve, but holding back the final strike. Each pause, each deliberate moment of restraint unsettled the Council more than any explosion. because they realized humans were not just strong, they were smart. On Earth, families gathered around screens watching live updates of victories and losses. People who once thought humanity could never stand against the galaxy now cheered when they saw alien ships turn and flee. This unity was new. It stretched from villages to great cities, binding them all in a single spirit. The spirit of survival and vengeance mixed together. The Council had not only created an enemy, they had created a force stronger than anything in their history. As the horizon sailed past the ruins of another defeated fleet, John whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning," because he knew the war was far from over. And in the shadows of space, darker plans were forming. But he also knew that Earth would never bow again. The nightmare for the Council had only started. The Galaxy Council gathered in secret chambers deep within their fortress world. The grand leaders, once proud, now sat in silence, broken by whispers of fear. The images of human warships crushing their fleets played again and again in their minds, and even those who tried to deny the truth could no longer escape it. Humans had become the nightmare of the Council. Every plan, every calculation had failed. And now they were left searching for any weakness in a species that refused to bow on the human side. Captain John stood at the bridge of the horizon, staring into the starfield. His crew moved quickly and with precision, but he felt the weight of every decision he made. Every battle meant lives lost, and he carried the faces of those, men and women with him. He knew Earth celebrated the victories. Yet he could not forget the cost. He whispered a promise to himself, that no sacrifice would be wasted, and that the galaxy would learn that humanity did not rise to war out of greed, but because they had been pushed into it. Lara remained in the capital, where long nights of planning had become routine. Her sharp mind connected the dots that others missed. She saw how the Council was crumbling from within. Species once loyal were defecting, small worlds refused to pay tribute, and entire fleets deserted rather than face humans. Again, she explained in one of the councils of Earth that the enemy was collapsing not from battles but from their own fear. She urged leaders to strike, not with endless destruction but with patience, because fear spreading uncontrolled could do more damage than 1,000 weapons. But the Council was desperate. They activated an ancient weapon buried on the icy moon of Vers, a weapon designed to erase whole worlds with a storm of energy. The plan was simple: unleash it on Earth and end the resistance in one blow. When John received word of this, he felt a chill run through him, because he knew if Earth fell, nothing else mattered. The horizon, along with a dozen other human ships, set course for Vers, racing against time before the weapon could be unleashed. The battle above the icy moon was unlike anything the crew had faced before. Alien ships swarmed not to win, but to delay. They sacrificed themselves to buy time for the weapon to charge. The sky burned with fire as human ships tore through the resistance, but John knew it was not enough. He ordered a desperate maneuver, diving the horizon straight toward the weapon itself. His crew followed without hesitation. Because they trusted him with their lives, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath in that moment. On the ground, Lara and the scientists worked frantically, decoding intercepted transmissions, trying to find a way to shut the weapon down remotely. Hours felt like seconds as the countdown neared its final stage. Then one of the younger scientists shouted with excitement they had found a weakness, a hidden code that could disrupt the control system. But it would require direct transmission from close range. The message was sent to John immediately. With no time left, John pushed the horizon into the line of fire and broadcasted the code through every channel. The ship shook under the pressure. Alien weapons hammered its hull, but the signal broke through at the last second. The weapon that was meant to erase Earth sputtered, glowed, and then collapsed upon itself in a storm of ice and light. The horizon barely escaped the shockwave, drifting wounded but alive. The Council received the news in horror. Their greatest weapon destroyed their fleets, shattered their authority, crumbling across the stars. Elder Vrekin slammed his fist against the table, screaming that humanity was cursed, but deep inside, he knew the truth. The nightmare had grown too big to contain. The humans had not only defended their world, they had shattered the illusion of Council power forever. On Earth, people celebrated in the streets. Bells rang and lights filled the night. Sky families hugged soldiers returned, and for the first time in weeks, the world breathed without fear. Yet John stood on the deck of his ship watching the stars. In silence, he knew this was not the end, because the Council would not surrender so easily. But he also knew something else. Something that gave him strength. Earth had survived, and in surviving they had proven they could not be broken, as the damaged horizon limped back toward friendly space. Lara sent a message to John. Her words were simple. You gave us a future, and John allowed himself a rare smile because he knew the fight was far from over. But humanity was no longer alone in the dark. They had become the storm that would change the galaxy forever. The Galaxy Council was no longer the mighty force it once had been. Its fleet scattered, its allies gone, its secrets revealed, and its power shattered across the stars. Yet the leaders clung to the last hope that humanity could be broken if they, struck with enough force, they gathered what remained of their fleets from every corner of the galaxy, bringing them together in one desperate attempt to crush Earth in a final war. It was the largest armada ever seen, and they named it the Judgment of the Stars, believing it would erase the Death Worlders once and for all. On Earth, the news reached every city, every village, every home. The skies filled with tension and silence. Families looked up at the stars, knowing the greatest battle of their history was coming. The president spoke to the world, his voice steady as he promised that Earth would never kneel, never surrender, and never forget those who had already fallen. His words spread beyond Earth, carried by signals that reached colonies, stations, and even alien worlds watching in secret, and many who once doubted now believed that humanity was unbreakable. Captain John stood on the bridge of the horizon, still scarred from the last battle. The ship barely repaired, yet ready once more. His crew waited with calm determination. Every one of them knowing this fight could be their last. John did not give a speech. He only said 3 words. Hold the line, and the crew answered with silence that carried more weight than any cheer because their silence was filled with trust and resolve. Lara worked deep within the command center on Earth, her fingers moving across screens filled with codes and maps. She coordinated fleets, sent updates to commanders, and tracked the armada drawing closer. She knew the enemy thought this was the end, but she also knew fear already hollowed them from within. She whispered to herself that humans had already won because the galaxy would never again see them as weak prey. The day of the final battle arrived. The sky above Earth lit with thousands of alien ships. The armada stretched across space like a wall of steel and fire. Every species loyal to the Council had sent what remained of their strength. The Council believed the weight of numbers would crush humanity, but they forgot that numbers mean nothing when courage burns brighter than fear. Human ships launched from orbit stations rising to meet the storm. The horizon at the front lines leading the charge missiles tore through the void energy. Beams carved trails of fire. The battle raged with a fury the galaxy had never seen. Alien commanders screamed orders, ships collided, worlds trembled. Yet through the chaos, humanity stood unbroken. Every ship fought, as if Earth itself was inside their hulls. Every soldier carried the weight of every family waiting below. In the midst of fire, John saw the largest alien dreadnought moving toward the planet, carrying the Council's final weapon, a core powerful enough to shatter continents. He knew, if it reached firing range, Earth would fall. He ordered the horizon forward without hesitation. The crew followed once again, trusting him with their lives. They weaved through enemy fire, dove between carriers, and charged the dreadnought head-on. At the same moment, Lara and her team discovered the dreadnought's weakness, a hidden flaw in the energy core. If struck in the right place, it would overload and destroy the ship. She sent the coordinates to John, his voice calm as he answered, "Received." Then he gave the order, all power to the main guns. The horizon shook as every ounce of its strength poured into a single strike. The beam cut through the void, piercing the dreadnought's core. For a moment, time froze. Then the giant ship erupted, in a storm of fire and light, tearing apart the heart of the armada. The explosion lit the sky brighter than any sun, waves of fire ripping through the Council fleet, breaking their lines, shattering their will. Panic spread as alien ships fled, scattering. In every direction, the great armada, once the pride of the galaxy, was nothing but ruins and silence. Humanity had faced the judgment of the stars and turned it into ashes on Earth. The people saw the light in the sky and knew they had survived. Cheers filled the cities, tears of joy flowed, and voices cried out in triumph. Children looked to the stars no longer in fear but in pride. The nightmare was over. The Galaxy Council had fallen, and humanity stood as victors in the ruins of their council chamber. The few surviving leaders whispered among themselves, broken and defeated. They realized their mistake had not been underestimating human weapons, but underestimating the human spirit. No chain, no threat, no fear could control a people who refused to bow. They had created their own nightmare, and now they would live in its shadow forever. John stood on the bridge of the horizon watching the stars, his ship battered but still standing. He thought of every life lost, every sacrifice made, and every victory earned. Lara's voice came through the channel, soft but strong. She told him the words all of Earth now believed: we are free. John closed his eyes for a moment and allowed himself to breathe. The war had ended, but he knew this was not just victory for Earth, it was the beginning of something greater. Humanity had risen from the edge of destruction, and now the stars themselves would never be the same. The galaxy would remember the day when Earth's revenge began, and the Council faced their nightmare, and in that memory humanity's name would live forever.